Hey guys, welcome back to Lawrence County High School for a whole new set of economic wisdom. We're going to call this unit Econ 3 because we've already done Econ 1 and Econ 2, so there's really nowhere else to go. This will sort of be a hodgepodge and we'll cover just some varied things here at Econ 3, but we're going to start off by talking about one of the most basic concepts in economics, which is something called supply and demand. So we've talked some about this, we probably have a general knowledge of what this is, but when economists define supply, they're going to say it's the amount of goods and services producers are willing and able to offer for sale at a possible price. Now this is some of that wonderful economic speak here. They're willing and able. That means they have the capacity to offer this for sale and they're going to do it, which leads me to believe that they think they're going to make a profit at a possible price. And we're going to see that the price that they can sell a good or service for will really have an impact on how much they're going to supply. The other side of this equation is demand. The amount of goods and services consumers are willing and able to purchase at a possible price. How much you and I, we're the consumers, how much we're willing to purchase at a possible price. And once again, price is going to have a big impact on how much demand there is for a good. And what we're going to see, if price is way up here, there may not be much demand. But if price comes down here, demand will probably increase. Just to clear up something when we talk about price and cost, because we sort of use those terms interchangeably. And economists will say, no, don't do that because there's a big difference. If someone buys something, you say, how much did that cost? And we all answer it. But really, when we look at it, we don't do that. Price is the amount needed to purchase a good or service. So whenever you pay for something, the money you gave for that good or service, that's the price. However, cost is the amount needed to produce a good or service. So just try to get that in your head to make a difference in those two terms. Price is how much you pay for something. Cost is how much it costs, I should use the term, the amount of money needed to produce that good. And so there's a big difference there. So my question to you is, just as a quick think, what would we call the difference between cost and price? There's a difference there. That would be profit. So if it cost $10 to produce a good and the price of the good is $15, then there would be $5 difference there, and that would be the profit of you selling that good. It cost you 10 to make it, you sold it for 15, the difference is $5, which is what we'll call profit. Now that we know what supply and demand is, let's look at the law of supply. And this is one of those just holy things that all economists will talk about. The law of supply holds that all other things being equal, as the price of a good or a service increases, its quantity supplied also increases, and the inverse or vice versa is true. So let's think about that for a second. Producers will produce more when prices go up because they seek higher profits, and also they can cover the higher marginal cost of production. But let's really understand what this is saying. Everything else being equal, which means there's no natural disasters, there's no shortage of material, there's no lack of labor, everything else being just as the way it always has been, as the price of a good or service goes up, producers will make more of it. They will supply more of that good or service. And the reason is, the price is way up here. They're going to make a good profit, so they're going to make as many of that item as they can. Then of course there's the law of demand, and if you guys are thinking ahead, you probably already got this figured out. The law of demand holds that all other things being equal, no earthquakes, no labor shortage, no lack of goods and materials. As the price of a good or service increases, its quantity demanded decreases. So you and I as consumers, when we see the cost of a good go up, we're not going to buy as much of it, which means we're the demand part of it. We're not going to demand as much of the good and service. But then again, the reverse is also true. As the price of a good or a service decreases, its quantity demanded increases. So when we see the price of something come down, we will probably demand more of it. Now, of course, you can find exceptions to that rule. Let's take what's going on right now with 2020. The cost of gasoline is down. I think today in Louisiana it was $1.67. Does that mean people are buying lots more of it because the price is way cheaper? And the answer is no, but that comes back to this all things being equal. And clearly, with COVID days going on, all things are not equal to what they were, let's say, a year ago. So there's your difference. Okay, what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at setting up a graph and using the supply curve and demand curve on that graph and see what happens and see about if they intersect and why they intersect and why we're even worried about it. So first off, we're going to look at supply and demand, and we're going to look at a couple of hypotheticals here and see which one is in greater demand. Are babies in greater demand or are iPhones in greater demand? What do you think? Well, if we look at some numbers, there are 371,000 babies born every day. There are 377,900 iPhones sold every day. So we can say that iPhones are actually in a little greater demand than babies. However, my numbers are a little bit old. In 2015, there was 231 million iPhones sold. If you want to back up a little farther, from 2007 to 2016, Apple sold over 1 billion iPhones. Now, I'm sure these numbers have gone up drastically here in 2020. But to get down to actually graphing, if we were in class right now, we would actually get out a graph and create a graph on paper, and I know you can do that because you do this in math class. And we would graph out supply and demand, and we'd have a supply curve and a demand curve, and we would see if they would intersect and why we're worried about it. So it's kind of weird to do it this way, but let's look at something called a supply curve. And you can see here from my very high-tech graphics, it's magically graphing itself right now. So what we're doing is we're looking at supply, which is telling us how much of a particular good the suppliers will offer for sale at any given price. So when we look here on our graph, the upward sloping line here is P, which is price. Our Q is how much they're going to produce. So what we see is if people who are selling pizzas can only sell for $1 a slice, they're going to make 10 pizzas. But if they can sell it for $2, they'll produce 20. If we go all the way up to $5, they can sell pizzas for $5 a slice, then they may supply up to 50 because they can make a lot of profit. And once again, this is all hypothetical. But what we see happen when we start to plot these points, at $1, they'll produce 10. At $2, they'll produce 20. At $3, they'll produce 30. $4, 40. And at $5, they'll produce 50. So whenever we draw that line, this is our supply curve, and it will always move up and to the right. And what that tells us is, we can always tell by the graph, as the price goes up, producers will make more. So as we move this way, we're going to move that way. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let's look at the demand curve. Same concept, but now we're looking at it from the consumer standpoint. As the price goes up, you and I want to buy less of something, and that's what we're seeing. If it's $1, we want to buy 50 of it. If it goes up to $2, maybe only 40. By the time it gets to $5, maybe we're going to buy 10 of those units. So what we see is the plot points run this way. Remember, when the price is $1, we demand 50. When the price is $4, we only demand 20. When the price gets to $5, we're only demanding 10. So demand curves are going to move this way, which means as the price gets higher, you and I want less of it. So now we got demand curve and a supply curve. Through the magic of technology here, let's see what happens whenever we put them both on the same point. Well, they're going to run in opposite directions, which means at some point they're going to intersect. And that intersection point is something really important to economists. It's called equilibrium. It's the point where supply and demand curves intersect, which means the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. This is really a magic number because this is where both buyers and sellers are satisfied. That means the sellers are saying, I'm making this much profit for every unit I sell, and I think this is okay. And the buyers at that same point are saying, this is how much I'm paying for a good or service, and I think I'm getting a value here. So both sides are happy at equilibrium, which is really the price of a good or service. You think about when you drive through that McDonald's drive-through and you look and a value meal is $9.40. Where did they get that price? Did they just make it up? Well, no, they've studied this and they've graphed out points, and they sort of know that this is a good price to where we're going to make a profit and consumers will still purchase the item. So if we were to graph out both on one chart, and let's say this was slices of pizza, we would see the equilibrium point would be somewhere around, and I'm going to guess this is $3, which means producers would like to get more money out of it, but we won't buy as much. Consumers would like to buy it cheaper, but it's not really going to be, if it's too cheap, they're not going to produce at all. So we see that that $3 mark is a happy medium. That's the equilibrium point. The last thing we'll talk about in this section is shortages and supplies. And once again, this is really something we can talk a lot about here in the COVID days of 2020. But what we're going to see is a shortage occurs whenever the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. And that's like a duh answer. We know that when people want to buy more of something than what there is of it, there's going to be a shortage. A shortage implies that the market price is too low. Now, a surplus, on the other hand, occurs whenever the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. And that's to say that producers have made too much of something and there isn't enough demand for it, so there's some left over. So the leftover quantity is the surplus. A surplus implies that the market price was too high. So the price was this high and no one really bought it, so there's a whole lot of it left over. If we really go back and look at the graph and think about that for a second, if I could get it to hold still. If the price was right here, that's a good equilibrium point, but what we're going to see is if the price was maybe up here at $5, no one bought much of the pizza, so that would cause a surplus. But if they dropped the price of the pizza down to, let's say, $1, they would sell out really quickly, which means there would be a shortage, which means the price was too low. And really, just to bring that back around to the whole mess with 2020, if you go in stores and you see that maybe toilet paper is all gone, well, the price, I guess, was really too low for it, and you and I didn't care to buy mass quantities of it. You could say the same thing for maybe meat that's in the freezer at the store. If there's not much meat there, the price was so low that people weren't afraid to buy it all up. So there has been some, people have noticed prices have raised slightly at some goods. Now this isn't really gouging, but if they just said, okay, we're gonna raise the price of toilet paper $2, and maybe people won't be so quick to buy it all up. Now if they raise the price of toilet paper to $15, that would be too high and there would be a surplus, but they're not gonna do that. And the same thing with meat. If they raise the cost of meat a couple dollars a pound, you and I will probably still buy what we need, but we're not going to buy a shopping cart full of it. Or at least that's what the hope is. So this is an interesting time during everything that's going on to look at prices and see how they've changed in stores. But once again, price is a big determinant of how much you and I will buy of a good or a service. We're going to knock off right here and we'll see you tomorrow with even more fun economic stuff.